Hello, everyone. George Christie here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to day two of the Wine Industry Sales Symposium. Now, day two is mainly going to be focused on direct consumer, but as is always the case, there's certainly some overlap with what we talk about with regard to the wholesale channel. And this first session does exactly that. It's titled "How to Integrate DTC and Three-Tier Practices for a Stronger Future." You know, how do you make that your efforts in one channel complement your efforts in the other channel? Today's session is going to be led by Susan DiMattei with Wineglass Marketing. But before we hand it off to Susan, I just want to remind everybody to please take advantage of those chat feature. Although we pre-recorded this, all of the speakers are in the room. They're watching the same broadcast you are, and they're going to take your questions as they come in. So please submit those questions. And one final thing, I want to thank our sponsors again. Today's session sponsor is eCELLAR. Thank you, eCELLAR, for all your support. And of course, our presenting sponsor, Red Chirp. Thank you, Red Chirp. We couldn't do this without you. Okay, folks, I think that's it. I'm going to hand it off to Susan and let you get started. Susan, take it away.
This session is sponsored by eCELLAR, pairing wine with data.
You need more people to taste your wines, join your club, and stay in it. Red Chirp's here to help. Get more and better leads from your website. Requests go right to your phone, so no one has to log in and staff it. And after they leave, you can still continue the conversation and make more sales. Club members should feel like friends, and friends text each other. Texting with Red Chirp is so easy. You'll never have to buy work phones or share your personal number. Plus, you'll reach people 10 times faster and get more responses, too. With all these new sales, you'll need a better way to collect payments. Do it by text with Red Chirp. It's more secure, more convenient, and you'll get paid 6 times faster. Text messaging will get you more leads, close more sales, and build stronger relationships. You make it possible. Red Chirp makes it easy.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm Susan DiMattei, the founder of Wineglass Marketing. We are a marketing agency that specializes in the adult beverage industry. For the past 9 years, I've had the pleasure of working with a wide array of people and products that have inspired me. And today, I'm very pleased to be sitting here with 2 of our clients that have really interesting stories to share. They both managed to launch new brands during the pandemic last year, but they did it in very different ways. First, we have Taylor Munson. She's the national and international director of sales and marketing for Goose Ridge Vineyards. Now, for those of you who don't know Goose Ridge, there are 4th generation landowners in Eastern Washington, and many of the original businesses still survive, such as cattle ranching, cherries, orchards, but the lion's share of their 2,200 acres is vineyards. Taylor sells the company's 5 wine brands: Goose Ridge Wines, G3, Stone's Cap, Tall Sage, and Cascadian Outfitters, which is the company's successful canned wine. Last year, they distilled their grape juice into Vito vodka, which we'll be talking about today, and they started a successful hand sanitizer business. The company runs 4 tasting rooms in Washington State, and Taylor has also championed a recent launch of Destination Brands, which is an umbrella organization that encompasses all of those labels for trade. We also have Jim Silver joining us. Jim has literally had every job from every angle of the wine business. He started 30 years ago as a retail wine buyer and a sommelier for the Four Seasons. Then he moved on to on-premise trade sales as the sales manager for wineries like Remy Martin and the Hess Collection. He served as New York State's trade liaison to the People's Republic of China. He also has founded and sold his own hard cider company. And he then went completely hospitality and D2C focused as the general manager for several wineries on Long Island, and eventually making his way to California for wineries such as Bonnie Doon, Martinelli, and Anderson Conn Valley. Currently, Jim is the managing director of Wren Acquisitions and the founder of the New Frontier Wine Company and the general manager for Wrenwood Winery and Alejandro Bulgaroni Estate in St. Helena. We're going to talk about all this. It's an exciting new producer of Napa Cabernets. He also imports Bordeaux, Argentinian, and Uruguayan wines. So our topic today is about the blurring lines between typical D2C activities and 3-tier activities. We're going to get the conversation started now, but I do want to encourage you to put your questions in the chat on the side of your screen, because this is pre-recorded, and what we're going to do is watch along with you, and then we can answer questions as you go. So Taylor, we're going to start with you. You and I were in a meeting about 2 weeks ago, and one of your sales guys said that retail is the new D2C. And Jim, you and I have had discussions about our so-called two-tier client channels like Wine Access and Last Bottle, and now what some are calling their fourth tier like Instacart and Drizzly. So it seems all bets are off and anybody can really use any tools. So let's start with Taylor. Both of you launched brands last year. How did you launch your vodka brand when you're all of on-premise and your bartenders were closed down?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Susan. I'm excited to be here virtually. And to say this has been a tough year and confusing year is underrated. And we actually decided to not only launch a new brand, but we launched in a new category during this pandemic. And so, we had a plan to launch our spirit brand very traditionally. We were going to start with an on-premise exclusive. We were going to build an ambassador program through mixologists and bartenders and really just educate the on-premise gatekeepers on our brand. But we quickly had to pivot that strategy due to the current state. And with DTC permanently closed, we quickly leaned on the relationships through our retail gatekeepers. We leaned on those relationships and we figured out a way to generate sales through a new channel with a new brand. And how we do that? Business 101, right? We leaned on those relationships through the support of the three-tier system. And once we gained that retail support and we gained that retailer trust, we had them asking for the product, which led to the wholesalers being able to bring the product in, which was the largest hurdle. And then second would be education, not only on the quality, but the unique part of our brand is it has a story. It's an actual person. It's from a family and a place. And so it was extremely crucial during the launch of that to get that message across. We had to get the story out because it connected all the dots. And so giving the retailers and the wholesalers and the whole system every tool they needed to believe in our brand and also educate their everyday customer on our brand, which led to number 3, gaining trust in the consumer and the customer. And we really built that trust through strong media planning. We came in with a full court press on how to generate impressions around the retail gatekeepers. And we really did that through geo-targeting, through influencers, and really building brand consistency across our boards through social media, website, and trade development to reach our national audience. I would say this pandemic definitely forced us to become very integrated in digital marketing. So that was our first and foremost strategy.
So interesting. So you had to pivot from a retail or an on-premise focus to retail. You did that by focusing on your relationships, focusing on the story, and then some media planning. That's really, an interesting strategy for how to get to retailers. I want to come back to that. But Jim, you had a vision for New Frontier portfolio before the pandemic, and after months and months of work and organization, you were all ready to launch February of 2020. What happened?
Well, March 2020 happened, unfortunately for us. But this is an interesting story. We had a large collection of assets to work with. We had the Wrenwood Winery, which provided a lot of volume for us. We had the Alejandro Bulgaroni estate in St. Helena, which provided really like the tip of the spear because it was such a quality-oriented, 100-point winning Cabernet producer. And in the middle, we had all this intellectual property that was previously managed by the bounty hunter, but was owned by us and produced by us. So brands like Justice and Pursuit and Waypoint and all those things they were mostly disorganized. But here we had this pile of terrific grape contracts. We had inventory. We had a great collection of winemakers to work with. How were we going to reorganize this into a traditional pyramid of brand qualities? And so we started with the name New Frontier and decided that Alejandro Bulgaroni would be at the top. The brand's New Frontier would fill out the middle and bring some 5,000 new cases of Napa wine to the market. and the Amador County Zinfandel would provide the fuel at the bottom. And this all sounded like a terrific, very traditional approach to the market. Alejandro should be DTC. New Frontier should be really aggressively on premise. And Renwood was retail ready, always has been retail ready, and with a very capable broker in place already. And then I hired a terrific trio of sales professionals. One I was able to grab from Pallmeyer, one from Frog's Leap, and one from Treasury, and put these folks together with this exciting portfolio and said, okay, by March, everything is going to be great. And of course, COVID changed the entire dynamic. We had to pivot too. What were we going to do about it? The traditional approach to DTC was flipped upside down. The traditional approach to retail completely flipped upside down, and on premise, didn't happen at all. So the pivot I considered then, and the pivot I think everyone needs to consider in situations like that, is that all the tools are available to you. You mentioned two-tier, and really, if you're not familiar, we're talking about really accomplished e-retailers like Glass Bottle and Wine Access and WTSO. And while some people hold them in a certain regard, they don't think that this is a viable channel for them. COVID makes you think very, very differently. I've always thought the two-tier was a very viable channel especially for a California winery, a viable channel for almost anyone who wants to be in front of a large wine-centric audience. I don't know how big the mailing lists are at these places, but I can tell you that they're very large. And if you get an email from one of these e-retailers on a regular basis, on a daily basis, you're my kind of customer, and I probably want to be in front of you. So we should probably, one of the things that I was successful at doing in the beginning of COVID was making that shift, making that quick pivot to almost any channel I could possibly reach. That was effective. It really worked.
So your choice was to work with other channels or other relationships similar to Taylor, but you leaned on your relationships with your sales reps, your retailers, and also your developing two-tier.
Yeah, very untraditional channels for considering the brand assortment. And, when you realize everyone's stuck at home and looking at the computer constantly, this is a channel you want to get to. When you realize that people are pantry loading aggressively, but they're doing it at Costco, you realize, gosh, I really think Costco is an important channel, or could be an important channel for me. And you might not have ever thought of that before, but I don't think Costco is a strategy per se in and of itself, but I do think that it is a tactic that is really workable for a lot of outfits.
Interesting. Okay, let's go back to you, Taylor. You mentioned using social media to support your retail relationships, and I think a lot of people might be wondering, well, how did you do that and not violate the Tide House laws? So Taylor, let's go back to you. You mentioned that you use social media to help support the relationships and build the relationships with your retailer. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering how you did that without violating three-tier or Tide House laws. Mm-hmm. So I have a couple of your ads here, and I'd love to show them, and maybe you could walk us through sort of your creative strategy on social.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is an example of geo-targeting in the state of Washington. So what we did was we took all the zip codes of the retail locations and we built ads that would hit the consumer social media pages if they were so many miles away from each store location. And so this really helped us in a lot of ways. You can also see on here that we kept the target age range quite broad on there, 21 to 65, right? And we did that because we're building a new brand, and actually the consumers that would click on these ads, it would actually help tell us who our demographic was. And that data was extremely important as well.
Interesting. And then also it looks like we cross-referenced it with propensity for cocktails, my kind of people.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. And then
really
the next slide. And then here's another example of one of the media ads that we did that actually involved a local mixologist. So because we were limited with on-premise, we had to start an outreach to local mixologists our own way. And we had to build brand ambassadors. And so this is where we were able to get the product actually in their mouths and lead them in the way to help gain local trust and a new following behind our brand. And so we started creating new cocktails with them. We started creating recipes with them, and we were able to share those creations with our online audience. And to have a name and a person behind the messaging of the brand was extremely important.
That's great. And I see a little cross promotion there of some of your other brands.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, yeah. And then the next slide here. So this is another example of a social media ad, but this is with the influencer. And again, because we weren't able to taste those influencers on the product in person, we built an online influencer program, and this is where we educated them. We had to give our influencers every single tool they needed to share our messaging and share that with their online audience. So, you name it, cocktail recipes, shakers, everything we could give them to really generate excitement around our brand. This is some great content that you got in response to that I just looked it up for you. It's just started, and you have over 120,000 impressions on some of these. Yeah, impressions are everything. That's definitely for sure. And then on the last slide here, I think you have. So not last but definitely not least, this is an example of our store locator. And so this can be accessed on our website, but on every single ad that we were pulling on our geotagging, had a call to action that the store locator was linked to. So every single consumer that could click on that advertisement could click on that call to action and find their product or our product near them, near a retailer near them. And so this definitely helped a lot. And the end goal here was to really just drive consumer support around our retail chains through our social media strategy. So you ran ads in a certain zip code around retailers that you knew had the product with the call to action, find Vito near you. And then you set up the store locator on your site with all your different stores. So you're not violating any laws because you're basically listing them all. That's brilliant. Yeah, exactly. So Jim, you took a little more traditional approach with some of your tools. Let's maybe walk through some examples for you. You want to start with your website?
Sure, go right ahead. No, I do want to say while COVID made me change a traditional plan to a non-traditional plan for sales, we had to find ourselves persistent. We had to really make this happen regardless of COVID, and that meant if everyone's going to be at home and sitting in front of the computer and buying wine, how can I engage them? How can I build up a DTC mailing list for Alejandro Bulgaroni? How can I create a mailing list for New Frontier where there never was one before? And how can I use the existing mailing list of Renwood to maybe fuel a little bit of all that? And at the same time, I have to engage with distributors. Distributors, we have to remember, of course, distributors are not in our business. They're in their business. And, deciding how and planning planning to help them get our message out is really key. And, I'm looking at the website here, but there's also a booklet attached to this as well that you helped create. It's a complex portfolio, and the easier the distributor has, the easier to understand it is for the distributor and the distributor salespeople, the better chance I am of actually getting into the marketplace the way I want to in that so-called traditional manner. But, if you can flip around in there, you can see that we included a little bit of animation, all the different brands, but really, you have something explaining the brands and their relationship to each other and the hierarchy of it, sort of the why. Yeah, well, honestly, what the website does, hopefully, is sell the why. We have great winemakers like Alberto Antonini and Michel Roland and Philippe Melka and Mayan Kashitsky and Matt Sands all working together under the same umbrella. That's extraordinary. How often do you see that happen in any wine company? We also have, 4 vineyards from Andy Beckstoffer and the terrific vineyards from the Bettinelli family under the same umbrella, making those wines as well. That the why should be obvious to anyone, but how to communicate it, it becomes the question here.
Well, then you have your trade page where you have everything laid out for your assets. And the booklet you were talking about here, I thought was really interesting, because this, to me, when we worked on it, was a literally you wrote the book on why this was put together, and you put this in the hands of your different distributors and your sales reps, so that any question about how this came to be, what the benefit of having all these together in one portfolio was. And it was a great takeaway piece that you had printed so that they could be mailed, but you also have this digital version, so it can just be a link in an email.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's part of the pivot that happened with the COVID pandemic. Is I printed several thousand copies of a really interesting book that was meant for distributors, but the distributors really weren't answering the phone at that point. They had their own problems and their own issues. And so going electronic with it made it a lot easier to hand out and a lot easier to communicate to those people who really were paying attention at that point. Coming out of it now, I mean, I think we're in a very good position to get our message out. The distributors are coming back together, and they're able to work with us on our plan for broad-based distribution in those markets. And at the same time, we've sat here for a year through the pandemic, collecting email, collecting social media impressions, and trying to engage where we've really never done that before, to build the DTC part of this whole thing. The bottom line is diversification of your income streams and diversification, honestly, of your outlets is going to be the most important thing. All tools, as you said in the beginning, using all the tools imaginable and all the tools available is what's really important.
Great. Really interesting stuff. So Taylor, let's bring us home here. Any final thoughts or any recommendations to anybody trying to launch something new or support an existing brand, but really the merger of the 3-tier and the D2C tools that you can learn from each other?
Yeah, Susan, like you said earlier, someone told me retail's the new DTC. And I think with strong media planning, it really can be to an extent, but start early. It has to be part of your launch strategy. It has to be the first thing you do. And, we have to find new ways to reach our consumer without having the advantage to do it in person. So that's definitely key. And I would also say share this data with your wholesalers. They appreciate the support, especially when building a new brand. They like to see all this support, and it's just another talking point. So share it with them. And I guess I would end on, we're really optimistic for our future. We're still learning. We're a very new brand. We're only a short year old. So we're definitely still learning. But we believe these tactics will help us become better partners in the long run. So thank you. Thank you for having us. It's been an interesting year, but everyone's made the best of it. That's for sure.
That's great. And Jim, any final thoughts on new constructs, tips for merging things together or using tools available to you?
Well, I think the gist of of this particular presentation was combining DTC or not combining, but using DTC to affect 3-tier, using 3-tier to affect DTC. I mean, honestly, COVID really exposed that potential. There's not really a wall between those two things anymore. They have to coexist. They have to work in tandem, and the strategies around that need to change. So how can one side of my business, the wholesale side, really benefit my DTC side, and vice versa? Of course, what tactics are we going to use to accomplish that? That's really what's key to building the whole business.
Well, thank you guys very much. We hope that was helpful. For any of you that you want to look up these wonderful products or some information about us, here are the 3 brands. We got Vito Vodka at drinkvito.com, newfrontierwines.com, and of course, wineglassmarketing.com. So we are here to answer your questions and chat. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.